welcome to the debate. Today, we are diving into what is arguably one of the most ambitious and influential industrial strategy documents released this decade, China's Energy-Saving and New Energy Vehicle Technology Roadmap 3.0. This plan, charting a course right through 2040 and shaped by, over 2,000 leading experts, sets out truly aggressive decarbonization goals, aiming for a 60% drop in automotive carbon emissions by 2040 and peak emissions remarkably as early as 2028.
It is a phenomenal text, absolutely. And, it doesn't just dictate China's path. It effectively draws a blueprint for the global automotive sector, forcing every major manufacturer to adapt. But the sheer breadth of its goals, I think, creates a fundamental tension right at its core.
Absolutely. And that tension really defines our question for today. Does Technology Roadmap 3.0 primarily mandate a rapid shift toward battery electric vehicle, or BEV, dominance as its core strategy? Or does it establish more of a dual-pillar approach, where optimized hybrid and internal combustion engine technology is maintained as an equally critical long-term necessity? Now, I'll be arguing that the staggering quantitative targets make BEV dominance the overwhelming, really the non-negotiable priority.
And I'm going to maintain that focusing solely on those BEV penetration figures, it leads to a bit of a reductive reading. The continued strategic commitment, the actual mandatory investment into sustaining and optimizing the IC and hybrid base, that elevates that segment far beyond just a simple transitional measure. It feels like a necessary pillar of resiliency to me.
Okay, let's look at the hard numbers outlined in the roadmap then, because I think they are the clearest argument for my position. The scale of the electrification target is simply massive. By 2040, new energy vehicle, or NEV, penetration is set to exceed 85% of all new passenger vehicles. That is the vast majority of the market transitioning away from traditional combustion. But here's the critical kicker. BEVs are expected to account for a full 80% of that dominant NEV segment.
80% of the NEV segment. Okay. I acknowledge those numbers are impressive, and certainly indicate a strong direction.
80% of 85% means, roughly two-thirds? About 68% of new passenger sales are essentially mandated to be pure BEV in just 15 years. Now, such a profound structural change, alongside the goal of achieving a 60% total carbon emissions drop from the peak by 2040, that's only really feasible if the primary engine of change is mass BEV adoption. That's a transition that fundamentally shifts the energy consumption source away from the internal combustion engine entirely.
I see why you emphasize that high percentage, I really do. But let me offer a slightly different perspective, maybe rooted more in the text's specific industrial mandates. If this were truly just a phase-out document, focused only on pure BEV as the sole solution, why does the roadmap explicitly affirm that ICEs will remain a critical power source for vehicles? That is, that's not really the language you use for a technology just awaiting obsolescence. Furthermore, the document mandates that all traditional energy passenger vehicles must achieve full hybridization by 2035. All of them.
Sure, but that mandatory hybridization, isn't that just regulatory pressure? A way to force maximum efficiency out of the, let's face it, diminishing segment that hasn't yet gone fully electric. It feels like a stopgap measure to meet those earlier emissions goals.
I'm not quite convinced by that line of reasoning. Simply because hybridization requires massive centralized industrial retooling and significant R&D spending. They are forcing the industry to perfect, not just discard, the existing engine architecture. We're talking about committing serious capital to sophisticated hybrids, HEVs, PHEVs, that's plug-in hybrids, and REVs, range-extended electric vehicles. That kind of sustained, mandated industrial investment, that feels like the hallmark of a core strategic pillar, not just some transitional concession.
But isn't that investment directed at what is essentially becoming the edge case?
That edge case constitutes a projected one-third, approximately 33% of new passenger sales still remaining ICE-based hybrids by 2040. In a market the sheer size of China's, that is not a small, negligible number. It's actually a colossal segment that you really can't ignore, particularly when you start considering the expansion of new energy commercial vehicles into more complex, medium and long-haul scenarios. That one-third commitment, I think, secures energy diversity and vehicle choice, especially where BEV logistics might still be cumbersome or less practical.
Okay, let's press on that one-third figure for a moment because it does seem to be the crux of our disagreement here. You argue the retention is strategic necessity. I'm saying it's more like the maximum segment where BEV viability is perhaps still being questioned by consumer habits or maybe charging infrastructure limitations.
I come in at it from a different way. Look, that's a compelling argument, that the 13 figure represents merely a gap filler, but let's consider the actual industrial commitment required. Have you really considered that sustaining a third of the world's largest auto market requires massive, continued, state-backed R&D into low-carbon, even carbon-neutral engines? They aren't just managing the retirement of existing models, they are mandating deep optimization right through 2040. If the structural goal was purely BEV dominance, wouldn't they just phase out ICE production entirely? Not force these complex hybridization mandates? It feels like they're preserving optionality.
Optionality, perhaps, but not primacy. I mean, if 85% of the market is NEVs and 80% of those NEVs are pure BEV, that is unequivocally the main technological and financial path. The 13 figure is simply the necessary segment where, yes, maybe logistical challenges persist, and look where the future R&D funding is truly slated to go. Solid-state battery technology, for instance. The roadmap projects small-scale application by 2030, with a large-scale global promotion by 2035. Now, that is the technological frontier that will secure global competitiveness for Chinese OEMs, arguably not incremental improvements to plug-in hybrids.
That is an excellent point about solid-state batteries being, the future gold standard. But it brings us straight to the strategic role of these newer low-carbon elements in the roadmap, which I think act as a kind of check on unchecked BEV expansion. I'm talking specifically about the inclusion of e-fuel as a theme and the incorporation of a life cycle carbon footprint, or LCCF, specifically for batteries.
I see the LCCF and e-fuels more as necessary compliance measures, frankly. Incorporating the LCCF is crucial if they want to expand sales to overseas OEMs and meet sophisticated global decarbonization standards like those in Europe, right? It's almost a prerequisite for market access, not really a structural challenge to BEV dominance itself. In e-fuels, they seem only relevant for optimizing that residual 13 IC share we were just talking about.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. If the LCCF were simply an export formality, just ticking a box for Europe, it wouldn't be highlighted as a new element of the roadmap specifically designed to provide, and I quote, scientific rigor and systematic coordination domestically. The LCCF fundamentally changes how success is measured. It deliberately moves the conversation away from just simple tailpipe emissions to include all the upstream carbon, the emissions from mining, manufacturing the battery packs themselves, and then recycling them down the line.
Exactly. It forces BEV manufacturers to clean up their supply chain, which is precisely what global regulators are increasingly demanding anyway. So it's still supporting the BEV expansion by making the technology more defensible, more sustainable overall.
Yes, but by acknowledging the potentially high carbon intensity of battery manufacturing, the roadmap implicitly recognizes that optimizing ICEs using, say, carbon-neutral e-fuels might actually present a lower LCCF pathway in certain use cases, especially where electricity generation itself remains carbon-heavy. This explicit advocacy for low-carbon technologies overall, instead of the older focus on fuel-efficient technologies, confirms for me a highly sophisticated, very pragmatic approach where carbon neutrality is the ultimate goal, regardless of the specific powertrain mechanism. And this framework elevates the high-efficiency hybrid base as a legitimate path to the 2040 carbon target, rather than just some stepping stone to be discarded.
Okay, I think we can agree, though, that the goal isn't just low-carbon vehicles, it's also intelligent vehicles. The roadmap sets incredibly ambitious targets for intelligent connected vehicles, ICVs, We're talking L4 widespread adoption and even L5 market entry by 2040.
Absolutely. Those L4 and L5 autonomy goals are transformative for the entire industry, potentially even more impactful than the shift in the power source itself.
Right. And my point is that achieving those complex autonomous systems benefits hugely from the simplified mechanical architecture inherent in BEVs. The lack of complex moving parts, the availability of those large flat battery platforms, it all facilitates the vehicle, road, cloud-integrated intelligent system they envision. The whole push for intelligence seems structurally synergistic with pure electrification, making the BEV the most natural, sort of streamlined platform for these advanced ICVs.
That synergy certainly exists, I won't deny that, but the goal stated in the roadmap is explicitly a transportation system dominated by intelligent, connected NEVs. The scope is clearly wider than just BEVs. And furthermore, we really have to look at the industrial infrastructure they are meticulously building to support this intelligence. The new 1 plus 5 plus X framework, for example, structurally integrates technical roadmaps not just for industrial product innovation, but, crucially, also for smart automotive manufacturing.
Okay, so what specifically does that framework tell us about this powertrain debate, in your view?
Well, it demonstrates a really tremendous depth of industrial planning. The focus isn't just on the vehicle, it's on achieving full integration of R&D, production, supply, sales, and service through things like data interoperability and closed-loop data across all stages by 2040. Now, this isn't just about streamlining simple BEV production, it's about investing heavily in a manufacturing capability sophisticated enough to produce a wide range of highly complex, intelligent vehicles, including those advanced hybrid drivetrains we've been discussing. This strategic depth, I believe, ensures industrial resiliency across multiple, sophisticated powertrain technologies, not just pinning hopes on the simplest one.
It seems we always return to this structural tension, maybe even a contradiction. I look at the numbers, the headline figures, and I see a clear commitment to mass market BEV dominance. It feels like a necessary path for achieving global scale and that massive decarbonization target. The 85% NEV penetration, the 80% BEV share within that, it just signals an unambiguous primary commitment to battery electric technology. The other elements, the hybrids, the e-fuels, the LCCF, they're essential components, sure, but they feel supportive of this central electric thrust.
And I conclude that the sheer complexity of the roadmap, its explicit retention of ICs as a, quote, critical power source, and the introduction of this new scientific rigor through LCCF and e-fuels, it all reveals a highly strategic dual mandate. The strategy seems to be electrify where it makes sense, absolutely, but simultaneously continually optimizing the high-efficiency hybrid base. Why? To ensure resiliency, industrial continuity, and broad market coverage, especially for those complex commercial and long-haul scenarios. The Chinese automotive future, as I read it, is intelligently hybridized and electric. It looks like a dual pursuit of low-carbon goals across all application types. Well, it's certainly clear that this technology roadmap 3.0 provides a profoundly nuanced vision for the future of mobility. It definitely attempts to reconcile incredibly aggressive electrification targets with what seems like necessary industrial resilience and the strategic flexibility required to dominate a very volatile global market.
Mm-hmm. It is far more complex than any simple binary mandate, that's for sure. And, we've only really scratched the surface today regarding the fascinating shift toward the ICV industrial architecture outlined in there and exactly how they plan to achieve global leadership across both intelligent manufacturing and these new energy solutions. There is clearly much more to unpack in this material.
Indeed there is. Well, thank you for joining us for this intellectual exchange on China's automotive future.
Yes, and we invite all our listeners to follow our channel for more deep dives and hopefully vigorous disagreements on critical source material.